Woo! Yes, it is open. Finally, I am delighted to be making this very quick and short video update for you about the coronavirus situation here in Ukraine and also Belarus, which I'm going to say just a little in a minute or two. Basically, the Ukrainian government has just made an important announcement. It's actually the watershed moment that I've been waiting for the last few months. And that is that if you arrive in Ukraine as a foreign visitor, you do not have to do the self-isolation of 2 weeks upon arrival if you take a particular type of coronavirus test, again, upon arrival. And of course, it has to be negative. If you have coronavirus, then you obviously still have to do the self-isolation. But what it means in effect is that Ukraine is open for international travelers finally in 2020 with this coronavirus mayhem. Now, up until this, there was basically a big complicated way of seeing whether you had to do this 2-week self-isolation or not upon arrival, and that depended, and it still depends on if you don't want to have to do the coronavirus test, of course. Basically, if you come from a country which has less than 40 cases per 100,000 people in the population, obviously you probably don't know off the top of your head, there's actually a list from the Ministry of Health, I think it is, but basically from the Ukrainian government telling you if you come from a country like that. Now, that's not just your nationality, that's actually the country you've been in for the last few weeks. And basically, I had an Israeli friend, to give you a very concrete example. He flew in about 3 days ago into Kiev, and Israel actually has slightly more than 40 cases per 100,000 per population, because that changes. They update the list every few days. And he had to do the self-isolation at his address. You're not allowed to go, I think it's more than I think 200 meters, I'm not sure the exact number. Basically, you have to stay very close to your apartment, and they check that multiple times a day, a lot of times a day, and you have to prove with a selfie and a geotag that you're actually at that address. So it's pretty onerous. You're not going to be able to get around that if you come from a country which has what they deem to be a high incidence of, a higher incidence of coronavirus. So this was obviously going to mean that it's a lot of hassle. Like my Israeli friend, you basically have to stay at home for 2 weeks, unless you're planning to spend a lot of time in Ukraine like he is, a few months, then it doesn't make sense to come here this summer. But now all that has changed. Ukraine is open. There's going to be a lot more details about exactly about what type of tests, where to do it, and whatnot coming out in the next few hours, I guess, if not the next few days. But I want to keep this video really simple and short. Basically, what you need to know is that Ukraine is open. Now, Belarus is another set of rules, but I can basically say the same thing about Belarus. There is a list of countries where you do not have to do a coronavirus test or sit at home, in self-isolation for 2 weeks upon arrival. And if your country is not on that list, which was a lot of countries like the US, for example, and that also includes obviously where you travel from. It's not just that you have a passport. You can't be an American citizen and been in Guatemala for 2 weeks and then use the US rules, for example. It would apply to where you've actually flown from. But basically, there's a legal workaround for having to do that self-isolation of 2 weeks if you come from a country that's not on the list. So I can also say that Belarus is open for international visitors as well. Now, Belarus didn't actually have a full lockdown, unlike here in Ukraine, which obviously did have a lockdown for a couple of months, basically. But as you can see, Odessa is open. Basically, all the restaurants, clubs, beach clubs, I'm going to say clubs, but nightclubs, bars, cafes, restaurants, everything is open. There are just a few minor restrictions. Intercity transport works, so you can come from, say, Kiev to Odessa and travel around the country normally. Same in Belarus, because they didn't close anything down in reality. So both of the countries are finally open for international visitors. That's the key message to take out of my short update video today. So you are going to have to look at all the intricacies before you book your tickets. Like, for example, what passport you have and what applies in terms of visa-free, and the other requirements you may have to undertake upon coming to Ukraine or Belarus. So that might be whether you need to take the coronavirus test before you get on the plane. It might be a possibility for you to have to do if you are flying to Belarus, for example, or upon arrival if you're coming to Ukraine, or maybe you don't have to do that at all. Whether, of course, now you don't have to do basically the self-isolation as long as you're negative for coronavirus, or you have a passport or are flying from countries which are not, where you do not have to do that requirement. So basically, before you're going to plane, make sure that you have everything sorted out and you understand exactly the rules, of course. But you can also contact me if you want clarification. That I do that on my consultancy calls for my clients, my consulting clients. So, shoot me a message, slide into my DMs on Instagram. My handle there is Zara Experience, or send me an email at connorklein@zaraexperience.com. If you are up for living the Zara Experience, then normal protocol applies. I have my link below in the description to my application form for that. But what's really exciting is tomorrow I'm going to have a big announcement video. I'm going to launch my second live online boot camp, following on the back of the great success I had with Scam Buster Bootcamp. It's going to be Slavic Seduction Secrets Bootcamp, and I'm going to be announcing that tomorrow and the details of how you can get in on that. It's a huge, exciting possibility for you to really nail everything in terms of dating beautiful Slavic women before you get on the plane and come here to Ukraine or Belarus this summer. And it's perfect timing that the day before I was going to announce that Ukraine has finally opened up. So see you very soon, either online on the new boot camp or here in person in Ukraine or in Belarus. Do побачення, до свидання from a finally open Odessa Mama, Ukraine.
Zara Experience.